Welcome to the Proceedings podcast. I'm Bill Hamlet, Editor-in-Chief of Proceedings. Today is August 1st, and the August issue of Proceedings, our annual Coast Guard focused issue, is live now. Today's episode is brought to you by Raytheon Missiles and Defense. The SPY-6 family of radars from Raytheon Missile and Defense is not just revolutionary, it's ready now. SPY-6 is being integrated on ships across the fleet to provide greater range, increased sensitivity, and more accurate discrimination for air and missile defense systems. Learn more at rtx.com/SPY6. Before I introduce our guest today, I want to highlight a couple of upcoming opportunities. First, our essay contest, our annual Marine Corps essay contest, has a deadline of 31 August and a top prize of $5,000. And our fiction contest, which we co-sponsor every year with SimSec, has a top prize of $500 and a deadline of mid-September. All our essay contests are judged in the blind. To find out more, go to www.usni.org/essay-contests. The second opportunity is just want to highlight the annual Naval Aviation Tailhook Symposium coming up in Reno, Nevada, 8 to 10 September. Ward Carroll and I will be there manning the Naval Institute booth, conducting podcasts again. If you attend Hook this year, please stop by and see us. And now, as I mentioned at the start, it's August, and that means Coast Guard at the Naval Institute. Happy 232nd birthday this month to the Coast Guard. Our guest today is Commander Craig Allen, the winner of the Naval Institute's 2022 Coast Guard Essay Contest. He's joining us from Seattle, where he has just finished his tour as commanding officer of the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Steadfast, a medium endurance cutter which is based in Astoria, Oregon. Craig, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bill.
All right. So congrats again on winning this year's contest. I want to tell our audience you've won not just this year's contest, but 5 of the past 7 Coast Guard essay contests in the past 7 years. And in my editor's page this month, I said that I think that makes you the Alfred Thayer Mahan of the modern day Coast Guard. And the essay contest is $5,000 for first place. So I hope you're driving a Corvette these days.
Well,
not quite.
Yeah, not quite. My wife does have a nice vehicle, but no Corvette for me.
Gotcha. All right. Well, let's start off by talking about your command tour. So Coast Guard cutter Steadfast, medium endurance cutter with a very long service life. So what was it like to command a ship that was commissioned a decade or more before you were born?
Yeah, it was a fantastic tour. Steadfast is 54 this year, and I think for a 54-year-old ship, she's in great shape. Certainly better than most cars that were built in 1968. It's just for perspective, Steadfast was commissioned before the first boots on the moon in 1969. So she's been around, and she definitely has a proud legacy. And when we go out there, do the mission, we do a lot of deployments all the way down to Central America, several thousand miles from our home port, and stay down there for a couple months and then come back. And it's a testament to the quality of the crew that she's able to continue doing that mission and actually still have quite a bit of success, even though she's certainly not the fastest or the most capable cutter down there. The crew was definitely second to none. So that made it a pleasure to command.
That's awesome. So that is a nice segue to your winning essay, which is titled Expeditionary Cutter Deployments Should Not Be a Mission to Mars. I'll repeat that again for our audio listeners. Expeditionary Cutter Deployments Should Not Be a Mission to Mars. It appears on pages 20 to 25 of the August proceedings. So you alluded to your ship Steadfast being commissioned before Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. You talk about a mission to Mars. What do you mean by Coast Guard deployments? Not that they shouldn't be like a mission to Mars.
So we have a lot of conversations about the logistics, and a lot of times it's something breaks and we're we're thousands of miles from our home port, and there's not a very robust logistics network for a lot of the places that we patrol for us to get the parts that we need when the system breaks. And we were kind of having a conversation about it on the wardroom in the wardroom one night, and I recently rewatched the Martian, the movie, and I said, we're kind of like Mark Watney out here. We're stuck on Mars, and we've got a problem, and we kind of have to science our way out of it because we can't get any kind of assistance in a timely manner. It takes a long time to get anything out to us, and so I thought that was kind of a commit I understand his plight, I guess, and feel that way often. And then started thinking about that, and it's like, here we are in the Eastern Pacific. At least we're still in our hemisphere, but look at where the Coast Guard's going. We're pushing out into Oceania, the Western Pacific. We're really starting to expand kind of the areas that we patrol, and that was one of the things I highlighted in the article is just looking at what the cutter fleet's been up to for the last year. And my friend Andy Pate, he's the CEO of the Mohawk, and he chimed in today and he said, "Hey, just FYI, here we are in Western Africa with a couple of FRCs that are on their way to Bahrain, and it's a fantastic opportunity. But I think we need to start thinking a little bit more about building up our logistics network for us to support more of those expeditionary kinds of missions."
Yeah, no doubt. So you riff on an article by Jim Holmes in 2021, and that article was titled "Great Responsibility Demands a Great Navy." And in your article, in the first page or so, you say, "With great responsibility comes great logistics requirements." So explain that a bit for our listeners.
I did read James Holmes' article. I think I might have been referencing the Spider-Man quote, "With great power comes great responsibility." But yeah. So I think that kind of gets to the crux of, well, we have kind of what we want to do, and I think that's articulated in a lot of our strategic documents right now. Certainly in the Tri-Service Maritime Strategy, we have several service level strategies that are talking about some of the mission space that we're looking to move into, and some pretty challenging logistics hurdles that's going to entail. But we don't really talk a whole lot about how we're going to get there. So we have the assets and OPCs. We're about to have our first offshore patrol cutter. That should be coming this fiscal year, and hopefully several others close on its heels. And we've got the national security cutters. Almost the entire program of record has been built and completed. And of course, the fast response cutters are doing great, and we have most of those built already. So the new fleet is on its way, and a lot of them are already delivered, and they have these fantastic capabilities: greater seakeeping, more range, more C5 ISR capability, et cetera. But how are we going to support them when something breaks? And I think it's kind of a cliche that the amateurs talk about strategy and the professionals talk logistics, but that certainly resonated a lot more with me the last 4 years, being on a national security cutter and a medium endurance cutter, doing a lot of kind of outside of the continental United States deployments, and just realizing how challenging it can be when we need parts and there just isn't a good way, or technical support, contractors, things that we can't do organically to stay mission capable. And I think we're going to have to start taking on some of those problems if we're going to get after some of those strategic goals that we have as a service.
Yeah, no doubt. So, Craig, for our listeners who aren't so aware of the global mission of the Coast Guard right now, you mentioned that we got the national security cutters have just been built out. That full fleet is almost done. The OPCs and the FRCs. The FRCs are coming online. The OPCs will soon be in the water. And the Coast Guard's now. You can see in the news in the past couple of years, there have been Coast Guard cutters that have done Taiwan Straits transits.
Mhm.
There's Coast Guard cutters. You mentioned Mohawk off the west coast of Africa. So why is all that happening? Why is the Coast Guard pushing out more globally right now?
I think it's responding to a demand signal. So there's a just a more demand, I think, right now than we can supply with the number of assets that we have. A lot of the engagements, the just kind of the security framework in areas like the Western Pacific, specifically South China Sea, Oceania, uh, talk a lot about the gray zone and kind of how we manage that is when our gray hole's the more appropriate asset to have on scene, and when might a white hulled Coast Guard cutter be more appropriate or send the message that we're trying to send. And uh, now that we have cutters that have those capabilities to push out that far, and the kind of they can communicate with the Navy and integrate with them better now, I think DoD is asking for more Coast Guard presence to help them out with some of their missions, and I think likewise State Department's interested in some of what we can offer, training, engagements, and certainly security presence out there as well. And um, we're actually unable to meet the demand just with the number of assets that we have, but we're kind of doing what we can with the cutters, and I think that's evident in especially the national security cutters. If you look at where the majority of their deployments are recently, for a long time you're seeing them mostly doing Eastern Pacific counter drug operations. Seeing a lot more Western Pacific, Oceania, and up in Alaska for their deployments recently.
So in Oceania, I know it's a lot of the illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing
Mm-hmm.
enforcement, right? Stopping, and much of that fleet is Chinese, but also from other countries where you've got fishing vessels that are encroaching on other nations' EEZs, and perhaps those countries don't have a big enough or a capable enough Coast Guard or Navy to enforce their EEZs. And then you mentioned off the west coast of Latin America, there's a lot of counter drug operations. I guess that's Caribbean and Latin America as well. And then what kinds of things are Coast Guard vessels doing off the west coast of Africa? Is that also IUU fishing enforcement?
Yes, IUU fishing is definitely that's a big both economic and security concern for Western Africa. So anything that we can do to enhance the security capabilities, and I think the skill sets of the Western African partner nations, coast guards and navies, to help them secure their own. I think it kind of starts. Can you secure your territorial seas, and then once you can do that pretty effectively. Now it's push out to your 200-mile EEZ, and you can see a lot of IUU fishing is happening in that region. And unfortunately, if the nations don't have the wherewithal to protect their waters, they end up getting depleted of their resources. So that's a mission that the Coast Guard is very good at, and we're certainly pretty fluent at doing the partnering with them to get them out there and help them out with that. So I think that's what we're seeing right now with the Mohawk, and the Thetis earlier this year was out there as well. So definitely a big concern, both from a security and economic perspective for West Africa. Certainly there's a piracy element to that as well. And so doing the kinds of infrastructure protection, shipboard protection, those kinds of things to counter the piracy threat is another priority for that region as well.
So your article doesn't just hint at; it's very specific about this. Feeling like when you're on a deployment on a Coast Guard cutter and you're a couple thousand miles, maybe 10,000 miles from home port,
Mhm.
it feels like you're on the other side of the moon, the dark side of the moon, or on Mars, perhaps, right? And so you're way out there. Logistically, you're unsupported. It's not like for our Navy members, myself included. The Navy's got this incredible logistics train. We are constantly pushing carrier strike groups forward. We've got the combat logistics force. We've got oilers that are coming out and bringing us fresh fruits and vegetables and POL and all that stuff, right? And carrier onboard deployment, carrier onboard delivery aircraft, or now it's the MV-22, delivering mail and those kinds of things. But so back to Steadfast in your time as CEO. So you deploy off the west coast of Latin America. What kind of logistics support did you have? You're what, 2, 3, 4,000 miles? Are you going down as far south as Chile? How far south are you going?
Not quite that far. I'd say probably Costa Rica is as far as we got on this last patrol, but certainly far enough that our U.S. based logistics network started getting strained. So just kind of to illustrate kind of how the process works. Let's say we've got a part on one of our cutter boats that goes down, and our cutter boats are kind of our main asset that we use for intercepting the fast moving drug smugglers. So
is that also like a rib? You call it a cutter boat? Is it a rib?
It is, yeah. Rigid hull inflatable, over the horizon capable, can go about 40 to 45 knots in calm seas, and we can push it out probably 50 miles from the cutter if we need to for a pursuit. And Steadfast has 2 of them, but it's been a challenge, a huge challenge for the time that I was on board to keep both of them, or even sometimes to keep one of them operational for an entire patrol, because what they're built to do is go out and run fast, and you run a boat like that and you beat everything up, and you're taking on a lot of salt spray, and there's a lot of electronics on that thing, so it's a challenge to keep it operational. There was one scenario, we were down there with another 270-foot cutter, and both of our cutter boats were down. Well, actually, one of our cutter boats was down. We couldn't launch the other one because the davit was inoperable. So we couldn't put a boat in the water, which raises a kind of a safety concern in addition to an operational concern. So we needed another cutter boat, we needed another cutter to supply a cutter boat, because the part that we needed, they had to take it from a warehouse in Maryland and fly it to an airfield in Florida, and then from there to another airfield, I think to El Salvador for that one, to get on another aircraft that would then fly over us and drop the part out by parachute. And that whole train took a little over a week from need to delivery. And it's pretty neat that we can do that, but it's certainly not an efficient process. And in the meantime, we were kind of stuck, unable to do the mission. So we rendezvoused with this other Coast Guard cutter and said, hey, can you guys put your cutter boat in the water to go retrieve this part that we need? And they said, sure. And they had 2 cutter boats as well. One of their boats was down. And then once they launched their one operational boat, they tried to start it and it wasn't starting. And we kind of had this moment where we were saying, we might both be kind of stuck, because between 4 cutter boats out here, we might not have any of them that are actually working. And then we'd be in a bit of a pickle. So unfortunately, they were able to get that other cutter boat started. We got our part. We were able to repair and kind of be on our way. But it's not an uncommon scenario. Cutter boats in particular are they're finicky, and it's tough to keep those things running. So my fantasy is to have sort of a cutter boat pool somewhere in Latin America, that if one boat goes down, you can swap it out. There's a team there that can repair it. You can take on another one that works and be on your way and keep doing the mission. Without that, you're kind of out of luck once they take some casualties. So that's, in its cutter boats, it's a lot of electronics. I talk a little bit about trying to enhance the organic resilience of the cutters, because the supply chain is pretty difficult. So what can we do to try to make the cutter itself more resilient? So if you do lose one system, there's a backup system, and it will keep you operational at least long enough to get back and repair whatever was wrong. And we do have some redundancy, but there's certainly a number of systems that we need and rely on that if it goes down, are kind of out of luck.
Yeah, so that gets to the part of your article where you tee up some ideas to fix this problem, right? To make perhaps the surface of Mars be a little closer, at least the moon or closer than that. So I jotted down the three main ideas from your article. One was self-sustainment. One was forward operating bases, and one was the possibility of the Coast Guard coming up with a mission support cutter. So you just talked a little bit about self-sustainment on cutters. Are in that vein, are you talking about machine shops? Are you talking about the ability to maybe do 3D printing of replacement parts on board the cutter itself? What kinds of things could you do on board your cutter or a national security cutter that would make the ship itself be more self-resilient?
So you mentioned the 3D printing, and I have seen actually a couple articles recently that the Navy is starting to bring that capability online for some of their ships, including, I think I saw recently an aircraft carrier might have gotten a liquid metal 3D printer installed. Which, to be honest, I don't fully understand what kind of capability that delivers, but it sounds pretty neat. So realistically, the Coast Guard probably isn't going to see anything quite to that level for a long time. But anything that we could do to allow a crew to create a part organically that, if we kind of know what our common fail parts are, and we can carry some spares, others we don't have. If there was a way that we could manufacture that, whether it's having a machine shop, kind of bringing back that capability, 3D printing, what have you, I think that would be a phenomenal investment for, especially as we turn to more expeditionary missions for those cutters. And then the other idea, the mission support cutter. You mentioned, the USNS fleet, that kind of the auxiliary ships that support the naval combatants when they're deployed. We kind of look at the development of why we have those ships, and sort of tracing the history of the Navy as the Navy started projecting further and further from the U.S. and taking on more and more expeditionary missions. That just naturally evolved because of the need. And I think we're seeing a similar evolution right now in the Coast Guard, where we're starting to expand a lot more into more expeditionary missions, but we haven't really developed that support auxiliary function yet. That's probably something that we want to start thinking about, looking at the Navy's logistics infrastructure and emulating it to a scale that makes sense for a much smaller service, but a service that is covering a lot of the same kinds of tyranny of distance with our missions.
I know that there's a lot of now Coast Guard fast response cutters. Is it 5 or 6, or maybe even more than that? They're in Bahrain, right? And so they're kind of taking the place of the Navy Patrol Coastal class, the small PCs, as the Navy phases those out as they get decommissioned. So for the FPCs that are forward in Bahrain, are they teaming up with naval forces in Bahrain, or are they out there alone and having to do self-sustainment? Is that like a separate FOB for them in Bahrain? Do you know?
Yeah, actually, Bahrain, I would say, is an example of a logistics infrastructure that works pretty well. So I was out there on a 110-foot patrol boat. That was back in 2010. So I guess my experience is a little dated, but staging out of Bahrain, we also had the Kuwait Naval Base that we could pull into, and then various ports around some of the GCC nations that we worked with. And that was actually a very effective support network. If we needed something, it was pretty easy to get that flown out to Kuwait Naval Base, we call KMB. We'd steam there from wherever, and we could probably get whatever we needed within about 24 hours, unless it was a part that wasn't already stocked in the warehouse that had to come from stateside. That was good working relationship between Coast Guard and the Navy there, and I thought that actually worked really well. What I think we had going for us though was just the scope of the area that we were working within was significantly smaller than something like the Eastern Pacific or certainly the Western Pacific. Now we're talking about tens of thousands of miles versus hundreds of miles.
Yeah, so much smaller geographic area in NavCent or CENTCOM area, particularly in the Persian Gulf, and a large presence already of U.S. naval forces and other forces there too. So, when a combatant commander, let's say U.S. Africa Command, requests a Coast Guard cutter presence, or U.S. Southern Command, right, is looking for a Coast Guard cutter presence, um, do they not assume some sort of responsibility for your logistics support?
They do, and so there's kind of a relationship between the J4 for the combatant command that we'll work for, and then our Department of Logistics. And I'd say that seam is, it's not a seamless process just yet, but I think because we're doing it more, we're starting to iron out some of the kinks that were there. And so when we go for the counter drug mission down in the Eastern Pacific, we're working for the Joint Interagency Task Force South underneath U.S. Southern Command. So their J4 does a lot of the logistics coordination for us, but they can only really work with what they have. And what they have is, kind of what I was describing before, a capability to airdrop certain parts that aren't too big or too fragile, and sometimes get them shipped into countries that we can pull into. Problem is though, you ship something that, some kind of electronic widget into a country like Mexico. Now it's got to clear customs before we can get it. And let's just say that there's several customs departments in some of our partner nations down there that probably have significant inventory of Coast Guard parts that never made it through that pipeline. They just, it takes a long time, or they might not make it. So that just kind of adds friction to the system, because we do have to rely on a lot of external entities to get what we need.
Yeah, that makes a very good point, because I remember aircraft carrier deployments to the Middle East, to NavCent and to the Persian Gulf. And I remember hearing, conversations from the N4 talking about, things clearing customs, but that was at the end of a conveyor belt that had been in process for years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so getting parts to Bahrain is one thing when you've done it day after day after day for nigh on 30 something years now, whereas getting a part to, Ecuador, a one-off part to Ecuador for a one-off ship deployment that might pull in next week. Yeah, that can get a lot. Yeah, that's a lot hairier. I can see how that would break down, a lot more frequently than getting a part to, an aircraft carrier off of Bahrain. That's a good point. I'd like to get back for a minute to the idea of a mission support cutter. Is there any traction? Is that a new idea that you're just floating here, or is that something that the Coast Guard is talking about, building a dedicated logistics ship essentially for deployments for cutters?
I think it's an idea that it's been tried out in different scopes and scales over the years. I think at one point there was one of the expeditionary fast catamaran hulls down there that was designed to kind of have an auxiliary function. And we have had different variations of support ships in the past, but nothing really that delivered anything close to the capability that a Navy ship operating would get from the USNS fleet. I did have the opportunity once when I was down there during we had a counter drug surge operation, and we had several Navy DDGs down there and an oiler supporting all of the assets in the Eastern Pacific. And I was down there on a national security cutter, and that was incredible because you need fuel, and it's there. You need fresh produce, they can fly it over. And so I kind of got a glimpse into, how the Navy gets, how the Navy operates. And so that was kind of in the back of my mind too, because that once the surge op ended, the oiler departed theater, and we are kind of back to where we were before. Um, so that's a dedicated Navy support ship. We probably don't need something quite to that scale for what we do, but I think it would be some phenomenal return on investment to have something that there's a lot of things that you could take off of the hands of the cutter crews. Detainees is a big one. There's certainly some political hurdles to that, but if we hold a lot of detainees that we have from different interdictions, and we're not built for that. We don't have facilities specifically designed for that. So if there was a support ship that could take them and hold on to them, and something that was kind of more specifically designed for that mission, that would be phenomenal. Having technicians on board who are really good at troubleshooting a lot of the things that come up on some of the complex systems that maybe the ship's force doesn't always have the training to troubleshoot on their own. 3D printing capability, those kinds of things. I think there could be a huge value add to having one or two of those supporting the major cutter fleet, and certainly the patrol boat fleet down there.
Is that something that you would see either a white hull or black hulled, Coast Guard dedicated ship with Coast Guard manning on board, or is that something that you could contract out? In other words, you get a what do they call them? An OSV, offshore support vessel, that
Mm-hmm.
the kind of ship that goes out and supports oil rigs, for example, for the commercial, oil and gas industry. Um, is there a preference either way, or is that something that perhaps start with the commercial and experiment it, and then
Mm-hmm.
see about building something that's a more dedicated platform to the Coast Guard?
Yeah, I think rather than try to design it from scratch and build it, because that's a long process and pretty expensive. I think there's a lot of other existing hull designs that would be suitable for that purpose. And as far as crewing, I think kind of the way the USNS fleet is crewed, with kind of a mix of active duty military and civilian, might be a good model to take a look at. And so that way you've got some blue suiters on there, but there's a huge, a kind of different topic, different article, but definitely we're having a hard time manning the fleet, or at least getting enough people excited about going afloat to kind of fill all the billets that we have for our existing cutters. So if we were to create more billets, that's going to create a stronger demand signal. But I think having the possibility of integrating some civilians into something like that might be a really effective way to address that issue.
Cool. All right. Well, Craig, unfortunately, we're out of time. It's been great to have you on the show. Our guest today has been Commander Craig Allen, U.S. Coast Guard. He's the winner of the 2022 Naval Institute Coast Guard Essay Contest. He's also won 5 of these contests. So congrats on being not just a one-time winner, but it's like you're a Tournament of Jeopardy champion here. And his article is titled "Expeditionary Cutter Deployments Should Not Be a Mission to Mars." You can find it in the August issue of Proceedings, or online at usni.org/proceedings. It's right on the Proceedings homepage, so you can find that very easily. It's great to have you on the show, and congrats on another Coast Guard essay winner. And also, Craig, good luck with your PCS move.
Thank you so much, Bill. Appreciate it.
That wraps up another episode of the Proceedings podcast. Thanks to our producer, Heather Legg. And this episode is brought to you by Raytheon Missiles and Defense, setting the pace of performance with the SPY-6 family of radars actively being integrated across the fleet. SPY-6 provides the clearest possible picture of the battle space with modular multi-mission capabilities that make it the most advanced radar on Earth. Learn more at rtx.com/SPY-6. Until next episode, remember, victory begins at the Naval Institute. We'll catch you next week.